He's a retired police officer, also a combat military veteran. Years of trauma in combat, combined with trauma as a police officer, took his toll on him, his marriage. He's now a minister. He's coming up to tell a story. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Today radio show. I'm your host. My name's John J. Wiley. In addition to being a radio broadcaster, I'm a retired police sergeant. For the latest news articles and much more, check out our website, letradioshow.com. In the Law Enforcement Today show, we'll be joined by special guests. We'll be talking about their experiences and issues affecting law enforcement officers, first responders, their families, their community, and victims of horrendous crimes. Be sure to like us on Facebook. Our page is Law Enforcement Today Radio Show. Check out the daily articles on our website, letradioshow.com. And while you're there, download our free app. There's only one official Facebook page. What you do a search on Facebook for Law Enforcement Today Radio Show. Click like and follow. There you'll find updates about upcoming episodes of the radio show. You can contact me. We also find unique, one-of-a-kind editorials and news articles. That is our Facebook page, Law Enforcement Today Radio Show. Be sure to click like and follow. Connecting with us from North Carolina, we have Jason Scalzi on the phone. Jason is a Marine Corps combat veteran. He's also a retired Vineland, New Jersey police officer. First of all, Jason, thank you for your service in both. Secondly, thanks for being a guest on the Law Enforcement Today Show. Very much appreciated.
John, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on as your guest.
Jason also is a part of the Law Enforcement Rapid Response Team for Billy Graham. Their website is rrt.billygraham.org/NLEM. If you just go to billygraham.org/NLEM, you'll find the information there. You've had a long career. You've been retired now how long?
I retired in 2016. From the police department.
Fairly recently. It's, 7 years ago? Does it seem like a lifetime ago?
It does seem like a lifetime ago. Right after I retired, I became a pastor for 3 years, and we could talk a little bit about that more later. But, yeah, it does seem like a long time ago.
I look back, Jason, sometimes, and I retired in 92. I got hurt and retired young when I was 33. An act of violence, which we'll talk about the trauma you endured in a moment. But sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. Sometimes it feels like a different life, a different person. And other times it seems like yesterday.
Yeah, John, you're talking that you got out in 1992, and I had just joined the Marine Corps in 1992 and went through all that training. And, then when I got out of the Marine Corps, I went through police academy and I ended up going through a second police academy, total of 32 weeks. And all that training does not prepare an officer and their family and what they actually will go through on the job. And it's amazing because all that training that I went through, it wasn't until, going on the roads and answering the calls and dealing with the community and dealing with all the hardships that officers deal with, that it really does change you, as they say in the academy. It does affect you. It does make you cynical.
It does. And one of the things that I hear quite often, and I would love to get your input on this, is that they know what they signed up for. It comes with the territory. And here's the reality. I thought I knew what I was getting into. I really had no concept how violent, how traumatic being a cop in Baltimore was going to be. And I think this is safe to say with anybody. Just the sheer call volume, the dealing with people at their absolute worst. Never mind the unintended deaths, the unexpected deaths, the homicides, the violent assaults, or the crimes perpetrated against me. Were you aware? Did you think you had a grip of what was heading your way?
Not to that magnitude. I mean, in the academy, of course, we all see the videos of officers being killed in the line of duty and seeing all those horrific scenes, and it does give you that fear. But when you're out on the street and you're seeing it, through your entire shift, whether you work 8 hours or 10 hours or whatever shift, and you're seeing it all the time, and you're dealing with the same people over and over again. Yeah, it definitely does affect you. And then when you're bringing it home and how it affects your spouse. I mean, I hear over and over again of officers not sharing with their spouse, the heartache and all the death and the violence that they are seeing throughout the day, and then they bring that home, and it affects their marriages and it affects their families as well.
It does, and it's a big part of the reason why my first marriage failed. And I tell people, my inability to handle the trauma better was a major contributor. It wasn't everything, but that was my part of it. And I was of an era where we didn't talk about stuff. We didn't tell people what happened. And here's a reason why, Jason, is because I didn't want my spouse to worry any more than she already did. Number one. Number two, I didn't want people, my wife included, to understand and comprehend how dangerous life really was. Sometimes it wasn't the boogeyman. It wasn't the scary creature you see on television. It was your next door neighbor.
Absolutely. I was very involved with our church, and I was seeing people that were coming into the sanctuary or coming into the church that I knew from the streets, that I knew that they shouldn't be around the youth, or they shouldn't be around the children's ministry. So, there's never a down time for officers. They're always in that heightened sense of awareness, and there's never a time to where they can just relax, and that does affect marriages, and that's why divorce rate is very high in the law enforcement community. In fact, a lot of officers aren't even marrying now because
it's sky high.
Yeah.
And our military brother in the same way. Different stressors, different issues, but it's the same result. Before you got into police work, you were in the Marine Corps. Were you active duty, reserve? It really doesn't matter because you shipped off and you saw combat, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I spent 4 years active duty in the Marine Corps, and when I got out of the Marine Corps is when I started. When I went to the academies, I was in the Army National Guard for 7 years, and I actually deployed to Kirkuk, Iraq, when I was in the Air National Guard out of the 177th Fighter Wing out of Atlantic City, New Jersey. So that's where I was a combat veteran with the Air National Guard.
So you made it through the Marine Corps, the tip of the spear. You went through Army Reserves, didn't see combat. You went to the Air National Guard Reserves, and you were thrust into combat zones.
Yes, sir.
People would think that was cake, that cake assignment. It's like, oh, you train once a month, and you never see active duty. That wasn't the case for you, was it?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I was a young police officer. I was married, had 3 small children, and I was allowing the stresses of the job to come home, and then, of course, that affected my marriage. So there was a deployment coming up to Iraq. John, I willingly went to Iraq without talking to my wife. It was easier for me to go into combat and to take a bullet than it was to deal with things at the home front. And so, I was in Kirkuk, Iraq in 2006. We were doing air-based ground defense with security forces. Got rocket attacked pretty much on a daily basis, and dealing with all that trauma, also the trauma of being away from home.
My dad was a career Navy veteran, and it was a different era. One of the things I say is we didn't have the internet back then. We didn't have a lot of times we didn't even get the phone call. He was heading home. If he was on the med cruise on an aircraft carrier, we'd find about 3 or 4 days before they were heading home that he was on our way home. It was very rare he got the call. Nowadays, it's a little bit better, but I never really took into comprehension just the stress of what it'd be like to be deployed, to be in a combat zone away from your family. And it's not lost on me when you say, I volunteered to go to Iraq knowing what was happening there rather than face what was going on at home. Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's a common thing within law enforcement officers, right? They'd rather go out to the local bar afterwards to do choir practice and than to deal with the issues that are at home. Because at the end of the day, when you retire or when you're no longer a police officer, it's your family. It's your family is what you have. So those are the important things that I really didn't realize until later on in my career.
We're talking with Jason Scalzi. He is a retired Vineland, New Jersey police officer, also a military combat veteran. We return. We're going to talk a little bit more about the rocket attacks in Iraq, followed by a really traumatic incident on his first day back on the job in U.S. soil as a police officer. This is a Law Enforcement Today show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Of all the radio stations in the United States, there's only one show like ours, the Law Enforcement Today radio show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for Law Enforcement Today radio show. That's Law Enforcement Today radio show on Facebook. When you get there, click like and follow.
I am Meg Marie O'Rourke from Harmony with Food. Do you ever wonder what foods you should or should not be consuming based on your own unique needs? At Harmony with Food, we are now able to determine exactly what foods we should or should not be consuming through advanced testing. Test, don't guess is the motto at Harmony with Food's BioUnique Boutique program. It has never been easier than now to determine what food, drinks, and supplements you need for your individualized needs. Head over to harmonywithfood.com and click on the testing tab.
Return our conversation with Jason Scalzi on the Law Enforcement Today show. Jason is a retired Vineland, New Jersey police officer, also a combat military veteran, and he is part of the Law Enforcement Rapid Response Team for Billy Graham. The website is billygraham.org/NLEM. Get more details there. I want to go to being deployed in Iraq. Before we went to break, you talked about things were not good at home. You're an active duty police officer, and rather than deal with those issues at home, you decide, I'll volunteer. I'll go to Iraq.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what happened in 2006. And so we get to Iraq, and we're providing air base ground defense for it was up in the northern part of Iraq in Kirkuk. You had the Army forward operating base there, and so it was normally on a regular basis where we'd get rocket attacked. And if you got hit by one of these rockets, it was your time, because they were pretty much set up on a washer machine timer set up on a little riverbed and just lobbed at the base. But one day there was about 3 or 4 different V beds that went off on the northern part of the base out in town, and we were talking prior to the break about social media, and we didn't know what happened. It was about 10 minutes later on the CNN where we found out that there was over 80 children that were killed at a day school. So you're dealing, not necessarily with the trauma of being there, but knowing that 80 children were killed that day. We had a guy drive up to the front gate where we responded, and his vehicle was set up with vehicle-borne IEDs that exploded, and there was Iraqi police that were killed. And then, of course, there was one day where we had to transport wounded military from the gate to our field hospital, and on the hood of the Humvee, providing life-saving techniques. So all these things that happened on a regular basis, at the time, I'm like, it's trauma, being rocket attacked and diving underneath of the vehicle to, for protection, and, then going back to work as if nothing happened, and thinking that, hey, I can't report or I can't tell anybody because I'm an active police officer at the time of the stresses that I'm under. But people in my unit over in Iraq noticed that there was odd behavior, that was happening, making a little twitch noise and stuff. And it was just me coping with the stresses. And it didn't come out till years later. We can talk about that as we move forward about getting the counseling that I needed. But these are some things that veterans and officers who are doing both, that they're not going to talk about it because the stresses that they're under, the PTSD, they're afraid that if they talk to anybody about the problem, that they're going to be taken off of duty, their weapon's going to be taken from them, and they're no longer going to be able to be a police officer. And that's who their identity was. And my identity was in being a police officer and a veteran at the time. Right.
Well, the other thing is, and as much as there's far more agencies across the United States that fire officers that develop post-traumatic stress disorder than those that help them. Or give them civilian jobs where they're not on the street anymore. That is the exception to the rule. A lot of times people, in my opinion, think that, police don't want to smash the stigma because they're afraid. Yeah, they're afraid. They're afraid of losing everything. They're afraid of, your family. When you get suspended without pay, for example, your family loses health insurance. your family loses everything. It's not just you, it's your family. So if you are a married officer and you have children, all of a sudden, all their health insurance goes away. All that stuff goes away. And that's a heavy toll that these officers carry with them. And then let's add into it, and I'm going into my own experience a little bit. I should be able to solve this. I got a lot of willpower. I have a lot of faith. I have a lot of strength. I can do whatever I set my mind to. However, that didn't work, and it created more problems than it solved. Going back to your story, brother, with the rocket attacks in Iraq, I can go to the worst days of my career in police work. The noise was incredible. The shouting, the yelling, the screaming, the gunshots, all that stuff. When the adrenaline was going, I was good. I knew what to do. It's when things got quiet that became a real issue for me. Was that the case for you?
Yeah, you go into survival mode. All the training that we've experienced through the military and through law enforcement, we're repetition, so that we had that muscle memory just to go into that mode. And to be honest with you, I thought that I did that in Iraq. And afterwards, I talked to a friend of mine who said, Jason, you froze. You jumped under the Humvee and you froze. And it wasn't until, I had to call your name, and they call that the fog of war, right? I mean, your father being in Vietnam, that was a huge thing there. And it wasn't until, somebody called my name that I jumped out of it and then went right back into that work mode. But when it comes to these critical incidents, we revert back to our training and during this time of being separated from my family, if it wasn't for my faith in God and really calling on Him and knowing Him as a friend, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And so we go through the physical training, we go through the mental training, but what about the spiritual fitness of our veterans and our law enforcement officers?
Well, that's a discussion for a little bit later on. And to be quite honest with you, a lot of what I had, as far as a connection with the God of my understanding, was gone. And it wasn't He that changed, it was me that changed.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of people that have been there to help me get connected again.
That's right.
When you have all this going on, one thing I'm going to go back to what you said, the fog of war. People had to call you and you froze. One of the things that I don't do, and it's because I can't, is I don't watch body cam videos. I don't watch dash cam videos. People send me those like I'm some sort of expert. I don't watch them because, number one, it throws me right back into it physically. And it takes a long time for me to return back to my center emotionally. A very long time. I don't like how I become. But the other thing is, we all have it in our mind's eye that we're going to act like Clint Eastwood, or we're going to act like John Wayne, and we're going to say funny little short things, whatever. That's not the reality. We make weird noises. We sometimes freeze. We sometimes run the other way and then engage. There's no real rhyme or reason. And it could be the toughest guy in the world that does this.
That's right. That's right. Colonel Grossman talked about in his book On Killing about the psychological effects that your body goes through in violent encounters. And, when your heart rate is through the roof, your fine motor skills deteriorate. So that's why, when the people who watch the John Wayne movies and say, oh, why couldn't you shoot him in the leg? That doesn't happen, right?
No.
That's just impossible.
Yeah, and then John Wayne would say something really sarcastic, or Clint Eastwood, and then they go knock down a couple shots of whiskey and be back at work the next day and they're fine, like nothing ever happened. And that is not the reality with most people I know. While there are a few that can do that, they get away with it for a while. After a while, in my experience, it catches up to everyone. This is Law Enforcement Today Show. Return our conversation with Jason Scalzi in just a few moments. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Are you wondering where you can find more great podcasts? Head to letradioshow.com, click Be Heard, and discover other fantastic podcasts like this one. Also available on our free app, all at letradioshow.com.
If you're on the Clubhouse drop-in audio chat app, be sure to look for me and follow me. My name's John, the letter J, Wiley, Wiley. You can also search for LET Radio Show. That's John J. Wiley, Wiley, at LET Radio Show on the Clubhouse drop-in audio chat app. This is a Law Enforcement Today show. Returning our conversation with Jason Scalzi. He's a retired Vineland, New Jersey police officer, also a combat military veteran. We talked about his combat deployment in Iraq, and then that was in reserves, and then you eventually returned home to your day job, as we call it, as a police officer in Vineland, New Jersey. Did you think that, after all this stuff in Iraq, all these rocket attacks, all the killing, all the violence, I'm safe and sound and I can let my guard down?
I thought, being back home with my family, I'd be able to start rebuilding my marriage and start reconnecting with my 3 young children, and I knew that I'd get right back to work. But to experience what I first experienced, my first day back, was definitely compounded the traumatic experiences that I had over in Iraq.
Tell us about that first day back.
Yeah, we were called to a missing child, and when we got there, the mother, she was an immigrant, and she was out at work, and she had her boyfriend stay home with the child, and so she had gotten home. The child was missing, and also the boyfriend. And so after searching the house, we saw some blood on the wall near the bed. And so at this time, we had reason to believe that there was a crime that had taken place. And so we continued to search the residence. And my sergeant at the time, we were down in the basement, looked behind the washer machine, and that's where we found this precious little child. And so I look back, and we have that flashbulb memory that we always hear about. That you'll always see those signs or the smells. You always remember the certain smells, and so I remember seeing that little child, which was probably 7-8 months old, on the gurney. And so having all the trauma experience over in Iraq now. You have this experience which compounded, and at the same time, you're just pushing it all in. You're not talking to nobody. It's affecting you with your relationship with your spouse and your children, and that's exactly what it did over the years.
I've always found it very difficult. When I say difficult, it wasn't difficult to do the job. We knew what to do. The procedures were the same, but I found it difficult emotionally and mentally afterwards, especially when it involved young children, very elderly. Those really got to me, and it challenged part of me emotionally. And here's a big part. I'll just go to one scenario. It was we had a call for a man who'd been dousing himself with kerosene, and I get called as a sergeant to back up. They go to the scene because the officer said, "This is bad. You got to come here." It was an elderly man who was blind, and he's living in the basement of some absentee landlord's house and was covered with bugs, and his solution was to pour kerosene all over himself, and he couldn't see. And I struggled with that I was so angry that someone in their 60s or 70s would be subjected to a life like that. It didn't correlate with what I knew or how I was raised. And it didn't correlate with my belief system. And yet that was the reality. So when crimes of violence against children occurred or other family members, I really struggled with that.
Yeah, it's something that in our nation that is founded on Judeo-Christian ethics, that's something that it's not expected, and it does affect our thought process. It does affect our belief system, and that's why it's so important to have a strong belief system and in God and in your faith. And that's what brought me through, and which brings many through as well. But these things unfortunately are happening more and more in our society because our society is unfortunately getting worse. But it's the law enforcement officers who are on the front lines who are pushing back, the works of evil and evil personnel who are preying against innocent victims. It's these law enforcement officers who understand that it's not a job; it's really a calling. That has been ordained by God to protect and to serve.
It is, and there's a saying, and I'm not going to quote the philosopher. It's an old philosopher, and it's, if you stare in the abyss too long, the abyss will stare back at you. And what it means, basically, the way I take it, is when you fight evil, when you have trauma, when you have violence all day long, if you don't have healthier ways to, I don't want to say cope with it or compensate, but if you don't have healthier mechanisms beyond that, a lot of times it'll consume you.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that does consume many officers when it comes to self-medication and dealing with the stresses. They're doing it in unhealthy ways. And thank God that a lot of these ways are in the academy. They're changing those teachings. Like when you went first in, and when I first went in the academy, it was pretty much suck it up and get back out on the street.
That's right.
And that's not the answer. That doesn't help. It only creates problems. I remember the first time that I went out for choir practice after a major call. My wife was home with two infant children, and let's just say, John, I never did that again, because when the officers dropped me off at my house, there was a verbal, heated altercation at the Scalzi household that day, and I never did that again. But unfortunately, that happens quite a bit.
Well, it does, and here's what we did. And we had the exact same saying. In Baltimore, the different slang and lingo and accents, they would call us police. That's what they said. So they would say, suck it up. You're Baltimore police. You got a job to do. You can always lick your wounds later on. And after really bad calls or really bad incidents, quite often we would do this thing where we go to a parking lot and have a case of beer and talk and drink. And in some respects, the talking part was beneficial. I was single. I was okay. The alcohol became an issue, not just for me, but for many people as well.
Yeah.
But there was some therapeutic things to that. However, here's the question I have for you. We seem, as an industry, to have gotten better dealing with what we call the critical incidents, and I'm air quoting, but we seem to lose it. Our focus is not the same when it comes to the daily grind of police work.
There's an education that's happening. There's an awareness, but there's also still a problem, because Chicago had over 7 suicides last year in Chicago. Suicide amongst police is still high because they're still not talking. They're still bottling it up. There was an old video that you may have seen. Memphis Police Department did it back in the 80s, and we were talking about talking to a bunch of officers who have been through critical incidents, and some of the words that they said, regarding the answer is on my hip, meaning that their weapon is on their hip, and that they're walking wounded, and that they're all the struggles that they're going through. So yeah, there's an education, there's a training, but there's still a underlying issue regarding the effects that this job has on the officers. And I think we're neglecting really dealing with the spiritual fitness of officers and their families.
Did you find that all this trauma, cumulative trauma over a while, had a negative effect on you?
Oh, it absolutely had a negative reflection on me. It affected my marriage. After I retired, I became a pastor for 3 years, and my wife was warning me that she was going to leave me. And eventually, in 2019, I was in Haiti, leading a trip to Haiti. And when I came back, she had the house packed up, and she moved back to our hometown. Now, since then, we have reconciled, and we're back working together, serving together. But it impacted my life tremendously, and even my children. My children were struggling. My oldest son, John, just passed away this past year, August 13th. And these were, just all things that affected me as when I was a police officer in my home life. And so I know that there's other officers out there that are going through some of the similar things.
If you don't deal with it, it comes out sideways, and it's not just you that's impacted, it's the family members as well. We're talking with Jason Scalzi. He's a retired Vineland, New Jersey police officer, also a U.S. military combat veteran. When we return, we're going to talk about what he did to change his life and what he's doing today. Don't go anywhere. Great stuff heading away. We'll be right back. Want to win great prizes in awesome contests? Who wouldn't want that? It's easy. Just sign up and subscribe for the Law Enforcement Today radio show email newsletter. We won't spam you. No more than 2 emails a week. I promise. All subscribers are automatically entered in all future contests. Sign up at letradioshow.com. Scroll down to the sign up area. That's letradioshow.com. Hi, this is John J. Wiley. This is the Law Enforcement Today show. Joining us, Jason Scalzi, contacting us from North Carolina. He is a retired Vineland, New Jersey police officer, also a U.S. military combat veteran. And we're talking about the effects of all the trauma, how it affects so many people, so many law enforcement officers, other first responders, and military combat veterans, and it comes out sideways and has a tremendous impact on the families. With the break, you said you retired from police work, you were a full-time pastor, you were doing some missionary work, and your marriage was crumbling, and your wife left. And fortunately, you all found a way to reconcile. Not everyone is so, that isn't in the cards for everybody. So when you were at your worst, Jason, how bad was it?
Yeah. Well, there's a season of at my worst. You know, it seemed like it was bad, then it would get good, then it would get even worse. There was a time in 2006, which we talked about. There was some bad days there. I come back, to the States, serving on the police department, working, and good days, bad days. But during those real dark times of my life, I would return to my faith. I would return to my belief in God, and I would. I thank God I didn't struggle with the self-medication, but some of the things that I did was work, and I would work harder, and I would dedicate myself more to serving others and neglecting my family. And that's wasn't good. That's just as bad as self-medicating. But when it got really, really bad is when I was pastoring, and I just led a great trip to Haiti. On the way back, I called my wife from Miami airport. I could hear it in her voice that she was done. And I says, "Are you leaving?" And she says, "Yes." Can you imagine that? I was with my daughter on the plane with other members from our church. And I know I'm going back home to a house that's completely engulfed in flames, burning to the ground. And I'm weeping on the airplane with my daughter. And I get back to the church parsonage, and the following day, my wife had the car packed up and drove back to our hometown. So now I'm there as the pastor of this church with all my family gone. And instead of getting the help that I needed a long time ago and getting counseling, that's one of the fears that people have, is that, the problem's not me, the problem's the other person in the relationship. And so I refused to get counseling. Well, now I was put in a position where I had no choice, because if I wanted to continue serving God and serving the church, then I better get some help for myself. And I immediately started getting counseling. And I was so grateful for the church at the time. They allowed me to stay there to get counseling. And I told them my number one goal is to reconcile with my spouse. And, and I didn't tell you this before, John, but there was a time in our marriage where, was I suicidal? No, but I took my off-duty weapon and I pointed it at my head in the middle of me arguing with my wife. And this is somebody who's a Christian, somebody who loves God, but I'm struggling, with all the anger and all the unable to fix my own marriage. And police officers, we're supposed to fix everybody's problems. Well, I couldn't even fix my own marriage and my own problems. So that was a dark time in my life.
That's exactly right. We're supposed to solve everybody else's problems, and I can't speak for other people. I couldn't understand why I couldn't solve mine. Here's the trap I fell into, Jason. I'll say the right thing, and then she'll reply with this, and then I'll reply with that, and then everything will be okay. And it'll be like Hollywood. It'll be happy ending. We'll have the nice house. We'll have the 2 kids. We'll have the white picket fence. We'll have the dog. We'll have all the stuff. And I'll be the guy I always wanted to be. And I was struggling because I couldn't find that guy.
That's exactly the vision and the dream that I had as well. And most officers, probably every officer has that dream. But in reality, that's the movies. That's not reality.
No, and that's why I get so angry sometimes in some of these movies, because it always works out in the end. Sometimes for a lot of us, and I'm so glad it wasn't the case with you and your spouse, sometimes it is divorce. Sometimes it's years without seeing your children. And then things start to get better, but none of that comes without work. Both equations, you got to work at this.
That's right. It took a lot of work. It took a lot of humility on both of our parts. It took us surrendering our will and our plans to each other. You know, marriage is it's created by God. If you have God number one in your life, then you both will treat one another the way that God would want them to be treated. And that's what we did. That's what helped us to reconcile. And we wouldn't be where we're at today if it wasn't for God in our life.
There must have come a point where you made a decision, I got to do things differently. And you started reaching out to counseling. You started doing a lot of other things and took advantage of the wonderful professionals out there. And I always say this, God provided us with great doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists. Avail yourself of them if you need them. And here's the scenario. It took me a long time to realize this. And I use this example all the time. Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes, they've got all these other team members they rely on. They've got offensive position coaches. They've got the offensive coordinator. They've got psychiatrists, therapists, nutritionists, all this other stuff they rely on to be the top of their game. Why is it so difficult for someone like me to turn and say, okay, maybe I'll kind of let you sort of kind of guide me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we see all the professionals. We see what the media portrays, right? And it all looks glamorous. You know, they have the big homes and the cars and everything. But, I mean, you're speaking of Tom Brady, for example, the guy's broken. You know, his marriage broke,
Yep.
You know. And so we're all broken people that need redemption, that need reconciliation. And it only comes through a relationship with God. And that's what brought us through. And I can tell to all the listeners, you know, whether they're law enforcement or military or people, that if you're going through something similar to this, you know, there's help out there. There's number one, there's God, and there's other professionals that can help as well.
Which goes right into what you're doing today. You're part of the law enforcement rapid response team for Billy Graham. The website is billygraham.org/NLEM. What is it that you all do?
Yes, well, our national law enforcement ministry came about during Ferguson. I was an active police officer at the time and actually deployed down to Ferguson, Missouri. They needed chaplains who were either active or retired police officers who understood the culture of the police department. And so they saw how we were interacting with the community and also with the law enforcement. It was making a huge impact, bringing peace into this crisis situation. Baltimore happened. You're
Yep.
from Baltimore. Remember the riots down there with Freddie Gray?
Yep.
The riots took place Monday. I was down there Tuesday morning, right out of North and Pennsylvania Avenue, providing, just a ministry of presence, talking with the community members, talking with the police. You know, obviously we weren't advertising that we were police officers, but we were sharing, you know, that, hey, we're on the job. We're not here to get in your way. And so they really, at this point, the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association saw the need to have a ministry for law enforcement officers. And the main focus is the strengthening the spiritual fitness of officers and their families. And we do that through many different ways. We have over 300 chaplains who are either active or retired police officers. We have retreats that we provide completely free of charge for officers and their families across the nation. And we started this a few years ago, LEAP Alaska. That's for officers who have been involved in a critical incident, officer-involved shooting, injured in the line of duty, something that has greatly impacted their marriage. If they meet the criteria and they apply, we send them and their spouse for a free week-long retreat to Alaska. We have 24 couples that we're sending to Alaska this year who have been involved in critical incidents that have greatly impacted their marriage. So these are just some of the things that we're doing.
Can you get information about that at the website, billygraham.org/NLEM?
Everything is right there on the website. If you go there, you'll see all the different things that we're doing. Email link if you need to reach out to us. The email is lawenforcementministry@dgea.org. You can contact us, and we will do whatever we can to help you and your families.
Jason, I appreciate your service to our country and also to your community in New Jersey. I appreciate your service as a police officer and military, but I really appreciate you coming on and telling your story on the Law Enforcement Today show. Very much appreciated.
Thank you for having me, John.
I'd like to thank our guests so much for coming on the Law Enforcement Today radio show. The Law Enforcement Today radio show is a nationally syndicated radio show broadcast on numerous stations once a week and growing. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, please do me a big favor. Tell a friend. I'll be back in just a couple days with a brand new episode of the Law Enforcement Today radio show and podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.
If your brain is at full capacity with to-dos, birthdays, and dinner plans, meet Skylight Calendar. It syncs your entire family's schedule onto a sleek digital display, so you focus on important things like where you left your coffee. Right now, Skylight is offering our listeners $30 off their 15-inch calendars by going to skylightcal.com/talk. Go to skylightcal.com/talk for $30 off your 15-inch calendar. That's skylightcal.com/talk.